everyone, welcome to my series called Analyzing Christian, where I try to analyze Christian's many patterns, behaviors, habits, and what I believe Chris is really trying to say at times. Please keep in mind that the goal of the series isn't about finding a singular, definitive answer. No, everything I say in my PodVids are always of my subjective viewpoints and opinions. I am not in any way saying Chris's best solution of all the possible solutions in the world is to do, this and that. No, that's not what I'm trying to say with this series. What I am really trying to say with this series is, here's what Chris said and did, and here's what I think it could mean in my subjective opinion. And lastly, before we begin, I want to make it clear that I would never pardon and excuse any of Chris's bad actions. No, I can't turn a blind eye to Chris's many wrongdoings and his criminal records. No, because in the end, whatever happened in the end happened. That's it. Chris still tried to run a guy over with his car. He got very angry with Boom Sonic's blue arms, and that led up to him pepper spraying a GameStop employee. So regardless to what I say in my series, the end result for Chris is never going to change, because Chris still went to jail for doing that to his then 79-year-old mother. So it goes. Now that I got the intro out of the way, what is today's analysis? Well, it's about my viewpoints and opinion to why Chris write letters from jail. Even though the Christian show is technically over, mostly. And even though he sits in jail, or depending on how long it takes to produce this podvid, maybe Chris is in prison by now. Maybe. But anyways, the Christian show isn't entirely over. I mean, at least it should have been over a year ago when he was apprehended. But it isn't, apparently. The Christian show won't stop until he stops writing to random people he don't know. People have told him hundreds of millions of times, don't talk to these people, don't feed the trolls. They're not your friends. They're not even part of your family. But Chris still does so. He still talks to trolls and strangers through handwritten letters from jail. Or alternatively, the jail/prison letters will only stop for good when he is no more. But I've gone long enough, so let's begin, yes? In one of my previous podvids called Christian's Prison Letters, and where I think of the prison saga as a whole, I did read out 2 of Chris's letters, and the first letter he wrote isn't that bad, in my opinion, despite his bad handwriting. But then, as time passes, his future letters becomes more and more outlandish, and his handwriting, surprisingly, gets a little better, it seems. Strange transformation. I know. Another thing that I said in my previous podvid, Chris versus niceness, was that I argued that it is 50-50. Half the time, yes, it is autism that Chris does what he does half the time, but on the other half, it also has to do with his upbringing and his environment. What I said in a nutshell in that previous podvid was, if you have a boy that grows up in an environment where all the adults are stupid, then consequently, that boy will most likely grow up to be a stupid adult he too. And when exactly should you say, Chris did what he did because of his autism, and when can you say, Chris did what he did because of his upbringing, his environment from back then? So which is which, and when can you say for sure that it has to do with his autism? That is what I tried to argue in my previous PodVid. But my previous PodVids aside, I have 3 theories to why Chris writes to specific people, even though Chris is in jail now, or maybe prison by now, and why he refuses to stop, even though you tell him to. Theory number 1. It could be a coping/defense mechanism. I think Chris could be writing those letters either as a coping or as a defense mechanism. It could be either of the two, or maybe both. Because I think Chris is going through, how do you say her name? Kubler-Ross? Is that how you say it? But, anyways, Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. Dabda. Chris denied to some people that he had touched his mother in that way. Or maybe the denial part has to do with why he was arrested. When he was finally apprehended, he looked angry on the kill stream. And when he was in court, he seemed angry there as well. I assume he was angry as well in court because he didn't want to waste his time in court. He just wanted to attend RonyCon in Seattle. And then he couldn't, sadly. I get the impression that Chris was probably thinking, come on, let me go already so I can go to RonyCon. Maybe. Or maybe not. And then I think a day or 2 later, he may have calmed down, and then he moved on to the next stage, maybe. Because of one of his letters, he sort of says that all of this is his mother's fault, which he is technically not wrong about. Not entirely. I mean who Chris turned out to be in the end swings back to his mom and dad and his environment, and not just to his autism. So I don't think Chris is entirely wrong when he blames his mom. In Chris's jail letter of 11th May 2022, Chris writes, quote, after the paid lovemaking with the kind Cherokee woman in April 2012, in May, I told my mom about it, and my mom literally propositioned me for lovemaking by telling me I would have done it with you myself, Christian. And in one aspect of her unconsciousness, Mom had considered me being a replacement for Mr. C, that is, Chris's father, after September 6, 2011. Close quote. Now, out of consideration for YouTube's algorithm and swear word policy, I substituted out a few words, but I think you, today's viewers/listeners, understood what Chris wrote. But here's the thing. When it comes to whatever Chris says, I most of the time go, because I take whatever Chris says with a huge grain of salt, because I don't know Chris personally, and I can't concretely prove or disprove what he's writing in those letters as true or false. So whatever Chris says is hard for me to believe, hard for me to prove or disprove, unfortunately. In my personal opinion, Chris writes based on what he thinks he knows, not based on what he actually knows. He doesn't know most of the time, he just thinks that he knows something. Okay? There's a difference between when you know something versus when you think you know something. There's a big difference. Now, just because Chris has autism, that doesn't mean that he can't lie, or doesn't know what that is, or that it's not a nice thing to do. No, Chris knows what lying is, and he seemingly knows that it is wrong. Because Chris has lied, just like how a normal person can lie sometimes. I mean, I'm not saying all normal people lie all the time. One bad apple doesn't speak for all bad apples. I'm not calling everyone who's a normal person a liar. That's not what I'm saying. But anyways, as for Chris, there could be a chance that Chris is alternatively lying unintentionally. You know what I'm saying? Remember when I said Chris most of the time thinks he knows something? If he isn't lying intentionally, he could be answering questions based on what he thinks people are asking him. And I think this has to do with autism, by the way. I can't help but be very certain that some autistics, not all of them, but some, do not define words and meanings in the same way as most normal people do. Like, I really wondered what Chris's definition is to what a couple is, or what a girlfriend is. It seems to me that Chris believes that calling somebody his girlfriend means that it is someone he only talked to for like 5 minutes. But that's not what the universal definition is for a girlfriend. That's not what a normal person thinks what it means to be a couple, or calling somebody their girlfriend. This is why I don't think, half the time, Chris is lying deliberately. If he's not lying, then I think he's just answering questions based on what he thinks what something means to him in his own definition. But anyways, while Chris was in court, it looked to me like he tried to bargain with the court. He said he didn't feel safe if he couldn't have his toys with him from home. Yeah, good luck with that. I mean, please don't tell me Chris screamed and stomped his feet hard and hoped that he would have gotten his way if he... I hope not. It doesn't work that way, and it shouldn't. I can already picture the way Chris conducted himself in court and his hearing, and I can picture everyone else's confusion in my head. Like, what? What is he doing? It makes me cringe. Now, I understand some autistics, some don't follow normal society's rules, societal norms, taboos, and social signals. I know, but I am surprised that even though Chris was in his late 30s when he was arrested, he did not come to terms with the reality that he lives in a society that is first and foremost, primarily, made for normal people. You know, a normal society. Chris does not live in a society made by and for autistics. No. And so, when Chris, back when he was arrested, attended court hearing, I think you call it? I am not so sure how the jurisdiction works over there in the US, but anyways, Chris didn't seem to care about the rules and honor of the court, or even how to play the normal game by normal people correctly, it seems. I know it sucks when I say this, I know, but normal society deems stomping your feet as a fully grown to be wrong, aka immature. But anyways, after his court hearing, Chris may have been depressed. Depressed that he would be sleeping in jail from then on. And maybe at the same time he was in denial, it seems. Maybe. And he may still be depressed. Maybe. As for when the next and last stage will happen for him, that is, acceptance, that I think hasn't happened yet. Or maybe it has, since, he's been in prison for more than a year. Or maybe he's not gonna come to terms with that, because, Chris is one of those autistics that seemingly can't adapt to his new environment. I think Chris is a guy that strikes me that clings onto the past like his life depends on it. Why? Well, like I've been trying to say, I think the one half has to do with his autism, and on the other half, I think I blame his shaky upbringing. But, anyways, I argued this in my previous PodVids, so I'm not gonna go in circles. But, so anyways, even though Chris, years ago, graduated from school, he still held on to his gal pals from all those years ago, and he still believed that they were legit interested in him, that they were his friends. And, if I am not mistaken, I think Chris also at one point still held on to who used to bully him, I think. I mean, there was this magician guy that dated Chris's childhood friend / bully, and Chris seemed to have held a grudge against him because, if I got this correctly, that childhood friend / bully sat on his lap. But anyways, about Chris's jail time, I wonder if he's fully gone through Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. I wonder, did Chris come to terms with the reality that he's going to be in jail for a couple of years? 9, 10, 11 years maybe? Or maybe Chris is still saying in his head, No, I'm going to be released soon. I will be released. I can get away from... I'm so going to be released with this. The law is on my side. I'll just tell the court system, I have autism, you have to let me go. And then I'll be released. Maybe that's what Chris is thinking. Or maybe not. Who really knows what is really going through his noodle? Or at least back then in 2021, when he was arrested. Or maybe at this point he might be in prison by now. Maybe. But aside from, Kubler-Ross, let us move on to theory number 2. Theory number 2. Chris may be addicted to the trolls, the fake fans, and the Weens. He could be addicted to the attention. I get the impression that Chris is very addicted to the attention he gets from the trolls and Weens, and people who analyze him. Like yours truly. But even though I analyze Chris from afar, all the way up here in Sweden, I am not going to talk down to him or, troll him, whatever. No, that's not what the whole show is about. I just want to take a look at him and take him apart, even if it is for all the wrong reasons. But anyways, I argue this because when Chris was young, he won some sort of a watch and win sweepstake, I think it's called. I think watch and win sweepstakes are primarily a North American thing, I think. I am not so sure because I've never heard of this watch and win sweepstake here in Sweden. I'm guessing that you basically play TV lottery or bingo, I think. Sweden has something to that effect, or maybe it still has. I don't remember much. I haven't tuned into my TV in a very, very long time. I mean, nowadays, what do I need a TV for now that I have a smartphone and YouTube on it? But anyways, as I was saying, because Chris was a winner of this watch and win sweepstake, he got a lot of attention from his elderly parents and from the mainstream media. The news reported on Chris's success. Yep, Chris was on TV, and the news reporter just had to mention Chris's autism a few times. And the news anchor, she praised him for doing pretty good for himself, despite having autism. But is that why they wanted to report on him? Because of his autism? Because he's special? That his autism is a unique thing that needs to be reported on? In order to make normal people be ashamed of themselves? Or that it's okay to be autistic just as it is okay to be of a different complexion, if I may say so, but I really don't know why they wanted to report on Chris back then. Even though there are some autistics out there that can do even more amazing things than winning a crummy watch and win sweepstake, TV lottery, or whatever that is. I mean, I read news reports on some savants and autistics that can play the guitar or piano just like a fully grown adult, even though that savant or autistic kid is around 6 or 10 years old. Now that I think is very amazing for some autistics to have, to play an instrument at a young age and be a master at it. That I think is a legit talented autistic that deserves to be reported on, in my opinion. But you know, as much as I hate to say it, you know what they say, right? Any kind of press is good press, and it doesn't matter what kind of a press it is, sadly. And I hate that. Did I say this in my Diablo podvid? Yeah, I think in my Diablo podvid where I said that I wish good press could be good press and bad press could be bad press, but you know, nah. Sadly, that's not how it is. But as I was saying, there is a popular belief that the news report of Chris's Watch and Win sweepstake was an early symptom of Chris's messiah complex. It may have given Chris the impression that he is something of a movie star. I argue that Chris loves the attention because back in his mid-20s when he was discovered by 4chan, around 2005 or 2007 or so, he seemed to have enjoyed that 4chan discovered him. But at the time, Chris also seemed to have been disappointed at the same time. When he was discovered, Chris thought that everyone was going to praise him and be nice to him and treat him like a Hollywood celebrity, but it didn't turn out that way in the end. I don't think Chris at the time understood what kind of a fame his Sonichu comic would bestow upon him. And I don't think Chris back then understood what kind of an impression he gave people. And I don't think he understood, at least in the beginning, that people were just being cynical with him. They were just being sarcastic. So when some people back then said, "This is the best comic in the history of ever," Chris maybe thought they meant it, he thought. Since, you know, it isn't that uncommon for some autistics to not understand sarcasm, understand cynicism. So when people back then were trolling, mocking, teasing and stealing his accounts, Chris maybe thought that he was the adult in the room. If you know what I mean. Maybe Chris thought that the comments back then came from playful kids, he may have thought. And even though people explained to him for years and years and years not to feed the trolls, he didn't listen to anybody. He fed the trolls anyways. Why? I got another reason why that could be, and it does dovetail to theory number 3. Theory number 3, he'll do anything he can to stay relevant because he seems to love the attention, even in jail. And bonus, what's going to happen after his passing? You know, with the amount of times Chris gets hooked to one fake friend or fake girlfriend after another in such a small time window, I can't help but speculate that Chris may have done it because he wanted to maintain his relevance, even though his troll base, if I may call it that, at the time only consisted of around 5 to 10 people or so. But Chris was under the impression that he was something of a Hollywood star. Maybe he thought. He may have believed that his comic books were good, legit good. And so, like I said, when people told him back then that his comic was the best thing ever, he believed that. He didn't think that people were just being sarcastic with him. And I believe Chris wants to stubbornly, in denial, hold on to that belief so badly that he'll do anything to stay relevant, even though 99% of the people that follows him are not legit. Maybe Chris knows that he is writing to trolls and is feeding them anyways, deliberately, or maybe he still believes that he is writing to actual fans and friends. Who knows, but yeah, with the amount of times Chris responds to the wrong people, I can't help but be under the impression that he loves the attention, and he'll do anything to stay afloat, even in jail/prison. I really wonder how it's all going to look like after his passing. Are people just going to quickly forget about Chris and move on to something else? Or maybe to another lol cow/horror cow? I imagine that as soon as Chris is no more, his relevance will plummet really, really hard. Well, okay, the mainstream media will most likely report on it, and then people will do a hashtag RIP Christian or hashtag goodbye Sonichu. But then afterwards, after the funeral and the mainstream media is finished reporting on it, that will be the last time the mainstream media reports on him and the end of Christian and his journey of life. Forever. In order for Chris to stop writing to trolls or to the wrong people, will be the day when the curtains closes for him, for good. But these are just my personal opinions, interpretations and best guesses to why he writes to people while he's in jail/prison, you know. In my interpretation, the story of Christian is the story of a boy who wanted to be free. A story of a boy who wanted to be all 1990s radical and get off the rail, you know, challenge the boss, challenge the man, get off the rail and beat the odds, you know, like in the movies. But Chris couldn't. It isn't solely because of his autism that he ended up like this, but also due to his bad circumstances on the other half, like I said. But how will the story of Christian come to an end? Only time will tell. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Analyzing Christian. You will all hear from me again either next week or next month. So take care and bye bye for now, everyone.